I've got something a little bit different for you. I'm going to combine my love of history with my love of quilting. I've been doing a lot of research into making an Underground Railroad quilt, as this is something that's been on my bucket list for quite a while now. But before making this quilt, I wanted to learn the history behind it. That's the history geek in me. I was a minor in history in college. Part of what intrigues me so much about this project is that my home state of Ohio has many well-known historic sites, inns, churches, homes that were all part of the Underground Railroad and helped to bring people to freedom. In fact, my area, Cleveland, Ohio, like a train station, was called Station Hope. And sometimes you can even find references to this city of hope for Cleveland because of the proximity to Lake Erie and the hope that the escaped slaves had when they saw the Great Lake, knowing that they were just a short boat ride away to freedom, to Canada. One of the blocks in the Underground Railroad quilt is the Churn block. As you can see hanging on the behind me, those are churn dashes. But it was known by a different name in the quilt. And that's what led me down this path of research that I found very interesting. And I now know more than I ever wanted to know about making butter in the early 1800s. The original turn dash block was a 9-patch style block that originated sometime early in the early 1800s. It has been known by many other names depending on what region of the country you're in or what state you're in. It has been known as the monkey wrench, remember this name for later, hole in the barn door, which I thought was really funny, and the shoe fly block, which I've heard before. Those were the most common alternative names. There are a few others out there, but they're not very common, and I've never heard any of the other ones before, so I didn't include them here. But that being said, it's pretty clear that the block's original name, churn dash, is the most historically accurate based on the item it is named for, the dash churn. So what is a dash churn? Here's where we dive down the butter making hole. It is a wooden container and plunger that was used to churn butter until the newer and faster methods were invented in the late 1800s. I'm going to pop up a picture here. The wooden plunger or dash, the long stick with a cross pattern of wood on the bottom as seen in the picture, as it was known, has an interesting history of its own. A woman would have to move the dash up and down at least 40 times per minute, for no less than 30 minutes. I can't even imagine, exhausting. And sometimes, depending on weather conditions, this became an hours-long task. They didn't understand back then the effect of cooler weather on the butter making process at the time and blamed the butter not getting solid on a churn witch. They were very superstitious. The cure for getting rid of the churn witch was heating up a horseshoe until it was hot and glowing and throwing it in the butter churn, which heated up the butter inside enough to allow it to solidify and scare away the witch. See the little rabbit hole I went down? The quilt block pattern was born from the impression that was left in the butter on the bottom of the wooden container made from the wood on the end of the dasher. So if you look at the pattern behind me and think about what you saw in the picture with that wooden dasher with the pattern on you can see where it was born from. The churn dash block was said to be one of the first blocks that the mother would teach her daughter when she was learning how to sew, because you would learn how to do half square triangles, rectangles, and squares. And it has been passed down from generation to generation ever since. To circle back just a little bit to the alternative name monkey wrench, it was adapted as a symbol for a freed African-American blacksmith who could travel between plantations and communicate with slaves. It was said that he would hang a quilt with the monkey wrench or the churn dash block, as we call it now, in the quilt when it was a safer, because let's face it, there was never a safe time to escape, but a safer time to escape. And it would communicate to the slaves to gather all their supplies and tools and things that they would need to get to their next stop. Today, the churn dash seems like a simple block, but understanding its historical significance definitely changed the meaning for me personally. I see it completely different. I see it as a beautiful symbol of hard work and freedom. As I make each block for this quilt, I plan on continuing to delve into the history of each block. So I invite you to join me on my journey to uncover the history of quilting. Now let's take a peek at how the churn dash block is made. So as I get started here, I wanted to pop up a couple pictures The first one is a picture of what an Underground Railroad quilt will look like when it's all finished. These couple of pictures were borrowed from friends who have already made them. And then the next picture after that, just the block, is a churn dash block. It's a churn dash block from the mid to late 1800s. It's an estimated kind of date. That was also provided to me by a friend who found it in a great-great-grandmother's stash, or I should say, yes, great-great-grandmother, sorry. I was trying to remember if she told me great-grandmother or great-great-grandmother. So great-great-grandmother's stash, so they believe it was from sometime in the mid-1800s to the late 1800s. Okay, and it was hand-stitched as well. So, to get started, you're going to need the following pieces if you're going to make a 12-inch finished or 12.5-inch unfinished churn dash block. First thing you're going to need is 2 5-inch of your print squares, 2 5-inch of your background squares. You're going to need a 4.5-inch background square, and then you're going to need 4 2.5 by 4.5-inch rectangles and 4 2.5-inch by 4.5-inch prints. So the first thing I'm going to do is join these together, and you're going to make 4 of these pieces. So I'm going to put these out of the way for now. So we're just going to join that together right like that. And you're going to sew down the long side of the rectangle, the 4.5-inch side. Turn dash blocks are very, very easy to make and go very quickly. And that's all there is to this piece. And you're going to make 4 of these pieces. I'm just going to press that open a little bit there. Or not open, but to the print. And I'll go back and press that with an iron in a little bit here. The next thing you're going to want to do after you make all 4 of these guys is you're going to want to make your half square triangles. You need 4 per block. So I'm going to do the 2 at a time method. Now, if you're making a whole quilt, you might want to try the 4 at a time or 8 at a time method just to go a little faster. But just for today's purposes, we're going to do 2 at a time. So I drew a line from corner to corner on the back of my backing or my background fabric, and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch on both sides of that line. Now you're going to have 2 sets of these to make 4 half square triangles. Okay, so I'm going to cut this apart right on that line that I drew. Get my rotary cutter, my ruler. Cut that apart. And now I'm going to press these just like I did with this guy towards the print or the darker fabric. Now I'm going to take all these to my little pressing board and grab my magic juice, which is the Acorn Easy Press Precision Piecing Pen and Solution. And if you've been watching me at all for any length of time, some of you may be new to me, but you know how much I love this stuff. My magic juice makes my pieces nice and flat. Okay, now I'm going to grab my iron and we're going to give these a press. They should be starting to press themselves a little bit just because we already finger pressed them and then also put the acorn on them. Okay, set that guy aside. Now these half square triangles, after you've finished making 4 and you've pressed them, you're going to want to trim these up to 4.5 inches square. So this component should be 4.5 inches. Your center background square is 4.5 inches. And each of these half square triangles should be 4.5 inches. So if you're good at math, you'll understand that a 9 patch made with 4.5 inches will end up being 12.5 inches unfinished, 12 inches finished in the quilt. So, and for the Underground Railroad quilt, I'm making all my blocks 12 inches. So now I'm just going to trim up these blocks. I'm going to use a regular ruler, but you can use a block lock or a clearly perfect slotted trimmer, although that one you have to do before you press. I'm just going to find that 45-degree line and put it right on that seam. And then trim the bits off of each side. Grab this one. See, as you can see, you've got a little bit to cut off, not a lot, but enough where if you have a little bit of error in your seam allowance, you'll still be fine because you can trim them down. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is close my rotary cutter before I hurt myself. And I'm going to put these together. This is going to be one of the outer pieces to the churn dash. So those are going to line up just like that. I'm going to grab my other pieces. To save time, so this tutorial didn't get too long since you guys already listened to me babble on about the history, I made the rest of this block. So you're going to take your center piece, your center 4.5-inch square, and you're going to put 2 of those rectangle sections onto that guy with the print touching the background. And then this piece that we're about to make right here, I already made the one here and attached it to this piece with the background facing out, or the very outside corners of this block. So let's go ahead and put these together. Very simple block, but very beautiful. Now I pressed the bottom row in and the middle row out, so I'm going to press the top row in as well for better nesting. Okay, let's give this piece a press. Give it some more magic juice. And then we can attach this to the other bit and the whole block will be done. Okay. Now all we have to do is add that edge to this, or that row to this, and we'll have our full churn dash block. Now this block that I'm making here is going to go into my Underground Railroad quilt, because I'm making it all with red, whites, and blues. I should say red, cream, and blues, because I don't want to have it too white, because they really didn't use white back then, so nor would they have used all red, white, and blue either, but I'm going to take a little bit of creative liberty there. Actually, back then they would have used leftovers from clothes, from blankets, shirtings, things like that. And the colors would have been very muted. Earth tones, pale pinks, like mauve pink, no bright colors, and usually very tan or creamy backgrounds. So they didn't use a lot of white and they didn't use bright colors. That's a very modern concept. All right, there we go. There is our churn dash block all finished. Well, I hope today gave you a new perspective on the churn dash block, how you can make it a little bit more modern with something like this, or very traditional with something like this. So here is the block that I finished today with you guys. And this is going to go into my Underground Railroad quilt. So one block done and many more to go. So I hope you'll join me on my YouTube channel for this year Underground Railroad series. Until then, I'll see ya, and I hope you have a wonderful day.